Yes, a question.
When you were saying about Jesus, when Jesus joked and said it didn't happen to Jesus, it would take some time, it's going to take a while, and it happened eventually, you say. So where did your eventually come from?
But certainly you'll find it in the Course that
So it comes from the Course.
also it comes through thinking about it, what the Course says. The Course says that our tolerance for pain is high, but not without limits. In the end, everyone will seek a better way. And goes on to say, this does not confront what I say, that you still have free will. But eventually, everyone must seek a better way. Jesus also implies a process in our time of millions of years for the last one to wake up. So we're given as long as we like to try the other way. But when you've banged your head for millions of years against the wall, you might at some point choose not to do it. So it is a logical... Oh yes, it's definitely in the Course. But I think it comes from common sense too.
Really? How do you work that one out?
Aren't you going to get tired of pain at some point?
I'm not in pain, but I mean, you were saying, it's common sense to think that, well, if you were to be in this, what you were talking about, when you look at recorded history, common sense is taking an awful long time. It's coming up with the same kind of results.
Well, recorded history compared to the Course is only a very brief. It talks of millions of years before the last one wakes up. I'm an optimist. Is there any other questions at this point while we're having questions?
I just wonder about this idea of eventually. It seems like the famous carrot, that it's the perfect formula for eternal sleep is to say, I'll wake up eventually. Because eventually it's like tomorrow never comes. And someone else said it's now or never. There's more immediacy about it than eventually.
But what a pressure, now or never. I've missed it, it's going to be never.
No, it's now.
I think Jesus is being compassionate with us here. He says, fear not that you won't be picked up and hurled into heaven. He says you'll go from your nightmares to your happy dreams, and then you wake up. The process can't be fast, it would be terrifying. But the now moments are the now moments of forgiveness. There's going to be thousands, hundreds of thousands of moments of forgiveness as we shift from nightmares to happy dreams. Yes, in the next second you could be Jesus. But if you look around, it doesn't happen very often because of the fear level is so high. Can we have someone else?
If you get to that point where you were saying that you sat with his coffee cup straight out and he wasn't there, if you get to that state permanently, does that mean actually the body dying?
That's sometimes a fearful question, that if we wake up, will the body die? But then there'd be ever-present guidance that will tell you whether you want to lay your body aside or keep it. Because also at that point, the body will be as nothing to you, the part of dust and water. You know that you're eternal spirit, and the body will only be used as a loving tool of communication. But if you're guided to lay it aside, that's no big deal. If you're guided to keep it, no big deal. See, once we've woken up to 100% guidance, then our lives are so easy. Like Jesus' life was so easy. He didn't have any choices because he didn't have to choose between the ego and the Holy Spirit. So is it the day for a walk in the park? Or no, it's the day to be crucified,
So you can still be more consciously aware though, rather than be vacant for 8 hours.
Right, I mean that was just a very short story. He didn't tell me what was happening in the 8 hours. But he did say...
Like the one walking, he walked for so many hours and...
Krishnamurti, yeah. But he didn't bump into bridges or step on scorpions.
No, but what good is he being here if he's not here?
For me, it's great good that someone can be so absent from their ego for 4 hours was an inspiration to me. And of course, in that state, you're so joined with spirit that it permeates you. you carry that over too.
Yeah.
So
When you come back, you're...
that's it, you know. So it's very practical too. So, you know, those that have woken up and are fully guided are outside the dream, but they know their body's in the dream, and their body can be used to help other bodies. Yes, they did Krishnamurti's laundry. But then they allowed him more time to write his books and speak to me. I think that was great, you know.
I was just thinking of that man who said that eventually. I think the problem with eventually is that, you know, if one has any compassion to wonders whether, you know, it'd be difficult, but eventually you wouldn't even read the book. You wouldn't read, you could fall back into sleep, couldn't you?
But that's the guidance from Jesus being taken by the ego. You see, Jesus says it will take a time because you're frightened of waking up immediately. So it will happen eventually. The ego can then say, great, don't have to do anything today, it'll happen eventually. But it'll only happen eventually as you practice forgiveness. So now there's every reason to practice forgiveness so eventually it doesn't become long. It's always our choice, you see. But the ego will try and grab any of this, like Jesus talks about reincarnation, which is a related question, and says, well, you know, in an absolute sense, as there's no time, there can't be reincarnation. But if it's a helpful, you know, theory for you, if it ends fear or reduces it, then believe it. However, it can lead to inertia in the present and pride in the past. So he says, yeah, it's a two-edged sword. Everything's a two-edged sword in the Course because the ego can grab every teaching there. Okay, let's move on. Talking of being practical, there's a section at the end of the manual called As for the Rest. And again, Jesus gives us some hints. To ask the Holy Spirit to decide for you is simply to accept your true inheritance. Does this mean that you cannot say anything without consulting Him? No, indeed. That would hardly be practical. And it's the practical for which this course is most concerned. If you have made it a habit to ask for help when and where you can be confident that wisdom will be given you when you need it. Prepare for this each morning. Remember God when you can throughout the day. Ask the Holy Spirit's help when it's feasible to do so, and thank Him for His guidance at night. And your confidence will be well founded indeed. So again, he's talking to us like little children and saying, well, you're not advanced yet, most of you, so check in the morning, check in the evening, and, you know, from time to time, ask for the help. Hold my hand and I'll lead you along this path, and bit by bit, you'll wake up. Shall we start? Some of the blocks that we need to look at will be our justified anger. Justified anger, when you feel angry, is that you've made up your mind already. That means you haven't turned to the Holy Spirit. I'm right, I'm feeling angry now, and that's my decision. Jesus gives us some help for this in the Teacher's Manual again on how do teachers of God deal with magic thoughts. And he says, it'd be helpful to remember that you can't get angry over a fact. Now, I say many things, and at times people get angry over what I say. But what I'm saying, even whether it's true or false, doesn't matter. It's a statement that is made. If anger comes up, then an interpretation has been made, Jesus says. The fact is, someone has just got killed outside the hotel. That's a fact. There's no emotion, there's no good, there's no bad. But once we interpret it, Drivers should drive more carefully, pedestrians should take more care, there shouldn't be cars. Then the judgments come in, the anger comes in. Once again, the ego's taken sides. Once anger is there, guidance is blocked. So if you're aware enough, then you can perhaps ask the Holy Spirit to come in and look at the anger with you. But that means you're ready to actually change the anger. And that's the difficult thing. We get so invested in our anger that we're right, that we won't give it over for another look. So vigilance and awareness is very necessary on this path. Helen would get upset, I think, quite regularly at Jesus. She was doing all this work, taking his book down, and she still felt fearful and angry. And she would ask him, take away my fear, like a trade-off for the book. And he replied to her once, the correction of fear is your responsibility. When you ask for release from fear, you're implying that it's not. You should ask instead for help in the conditions that have brought the fear about. These conditions always entail a willingness to be separate. At that level, you can help it. And then this key line to Helen, you are much too tolerant of mind wandering and are passively condoning your mind's miscreations. Elsewhere it says there's no such thing as idle thoughts. So this is work, and it's hard work, to be aware, to step back and watch the ego at work. At the beginning, there's very little you might be able to do, say, about your anger. But if you just step back and say, there I go again, that's a wonderful step. And then maybe another time, there I go again, and perhaps a slight smile. Go out on the roads and get cut up, or somebody jumps the queue and you get angry. And you think, oh, I wanted to kill my parents yesterday, didn't I? What's new? Well, the Americans say, no big deal. And then maybe the anger's not so long. So this watching, this awareness, this vigilance is the heart of all true spiritual traditions. Yes?
You know how, for example, in Buddhism, the deities, enlightenment, compassion, often come also in a picture of a wrathful soul. Either this idea of sort of enlightened wrathfulness. You know what I mean?
Enlightened rat, did you say?
Wrathful. There's not anger, they don't really use the word anger.
Oh, they use animal symbols. Yeah.
No, not wrathful. Wrathful.
Raffle, I'm there.
Yeah. And so there seems to be this concept that somebody can be, as it seems to be manifesting like an anger, like or wrathfulness, but not from the ego. Is there anything like this in the Course?
So like divine wrath.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
something that can seem wrathful, but it's not coming from.
Okay, teachers, I think I understand what you mean now. Teachers can sometimes put on anger, though they're not angry themselves. I certainly read a few accounts, people like Ramana Maharshi, who at some point would get angry, and this person would leave, and they look at him, at Ramana again, he's totally at peace. No continuation. As if it was a teaching device. Certainly in the Course, there is no justified anger at all, anywhere. Anger must always come in a justified sense from the ego. But a play of anger may be needed.
Because this is something I've been wondering, like sometimes when I'm working with somebody, like in a legal situation or talking to somebody, and I feel, as it were, for directness, I like to make some emphasis. But then I can't remember because it's not justified anger, so instead I keep myself quite soft, and sometimes almost regret not feeling strong enough to be quite clear on the subject.
Okay, I feel there's a certain difference between being direct, clear, and forceful, and a show of anger. They'd be different devices. Yeah. But I'm sure if we were around when Jesus was teaching, he'd be quite a strong, forceful, direct, How did Helen feel? She used to call him sometimes the top sergeant. You wouldn't go against him. But, he wasn't angry, but he was authoritative and gentle and that had a power. As I've had a 5-minute card there, let me just finish with the ego, because that's our main block. And a little story that I was told to illustrate the ego and its seeming power, because we've given it the power. What is this? And the teacher gave a story of a cow herder. And in the morning, he'd take his cows out of the shed, out onto the pastures, and at night bring them back and tie them up so they didn't wander off. But he lost one of his ropes, and he was frightened that he'd lose a cow. So he went to this wise man who said, pretend to tie him up. So he went back to the cow shed and got the cow and pretended to put the rope and tie it, you see. It worked. In the morning, there was this cow just standing where he'd been roped. So it was morning time, so he took all the ropes off the other cows and led them out. And he counted the cows, there was one missing. And he went back to the shed, and there's the cow with the invisible rope, you see. So he goes back to the wise man and says, what should I do? He says, just take the rope off. So he goes back and takes the rope off. The cow leaps out. That rope is the ego. It does not exist. We believe it exists. And that rope and our belief in it makes it real and blocks the guidance. But it has no power other than what we give it. And as we start to give it less power by just smiling at it, watching it come up and playing all of its tricks, we realize it's invisible. And then the light of the Holy Spirit will then just shine deeper and deeper through and gently wake us up step by step. Okay, I think the time is up. So, thank you for coming.
Thank you.